Welcome. Today we're going to discuss what it means to prepare a feast for your children as we consider going back to school and all that that means for the students who live in your home. Let's begin with this Charlotte Mason quote. To introduce children to literature is to install them in a very rich and glorious kingdom, to bring a continual holiday to their doors, to lay before them a feast exquisitely served. But they must learn to know literature by being familiar with it from the very first. A child's intercourse must always be with good books, the best that we can find. With that in mind, it's worth considering why use the great books as the center of a literature and history curriculum. So great books is capitalized there because we're thinking about a very specific set of books, not just books you happen to like, but a very set type and set genre of books that we include in our literature and in our history. Different people might have a different description of what exactly is considered a great book, but essentially using these books breaks down that artificial division between history and literature, rather than having books that are just meant for history, or books that are just meant for science, or books that you just study in English class. Instead, you have this completely integrated set of resources, and that you want to furnish your children's mind with them. And so when you're choosing your books, you want to bring that history to life. You want to bring their learning to life and integrate all of those different components. So as you're considering what to add to your library, you want to ask yourself, am I cultivating a rich literary diet? And so what does that mean for each household? Will obviously change. But essentially, you don't want to just have books that are only read-alouds, that the kids will hopefully read when they're grown. Or you don't want to just have books that are only at the children's level. You want to have books that unite you together. If you've ever read The Read-Aloud Family, that's a great book that will really paint that vision for you of having books that unite your family together. Your jokes come from them and your shared understanding comes from them. And you've got books that are of different levels but also of different topics, and these are books that are worth the time reading. There's not that twaddle, as Charlotte Mason used to call it. Regardless of what your topics are, obviously, like I said, that will change from household to household. There's some categories that are going to be in every good, well-stocked library, regardless of your family's particular interests or likes. So first of all, you should have some read-aloud books. So these are books that you as the adult are reading to your children. And those are really important because it gives the children a very good vocabulary, gives them a good literary understanding. There are books that they can't access themselves as readers, but that you can access for them as you read aloud. So that's one category. And I often find that once I've read a book aloud, for example, we read Little Women, and I read the original proper grown-up text, but then I provided my children with the children's versions at various different levels, as low as I could get, and then building forward. And that's really great because they have this wonderful, beautiful story, and then they can learn about that in their own reading ability levels. Next, you have the independent reading books. So these are books that are at their level or maybe even just slightly above, but they're able to understand the story, they're able to read them for enjoyment. Hopefully they would be across many different genres, many different topics, and these are books that your child can pick up on their own and enjoy at their own pace. The next type of book you want to have is called instructional books. So these are books that are slightly above their reading level and that you use to build those reading skills. In the early years, obviously that's like phonics and word sounds and sight words, but then as you go forward, that starts to be grammar and vocabulary. That starts to be sentence structure, and then you can even get into preparing an essay or preparing for different topics like science or history and so on. These are books that you use to build your child's skills. Finally, I want to put on your radar content-based books. So these are books that probably came with your curriculum if you're using a box set, or are books that match your curriculum topics. So for example, we're teaching a unit on animals in the fall, and so I've been collecting information books, story books, picture books, sticker books, you name it, all about animals. Whatever your topic is, across a variety of different levels of reading ability, you're going to be collecting books based on the content that you're planning to teach, and that's your primary goal of these type of books. keeping those 4 categories in mind as you try and stock your library can be really helpful, because a well-stocked library can serve a purpose far beyond just getting your kids reading more. This is why you often see the title Great Books capitalized, because these books are specifically used for understanding our own civilization and country and our place in time. They're stemming from an understanding of what has come before us as a civilization and what we are as a people and what it means to be human. This is not just a book that we think is great, but this is a book that deepens our understanding and connects us to other people who also have the same understanding. A great book is not just an exhaustive exploration of books that you might consider to be at the top of your must-read bucket list. For example, I've heard of people saying, "Oh, Moby Dick is definitely a great book," and whether it is or isn't based on whether or not you happen to like that book. Does that book, using Moby Dick as an example, explore who we are as people, what makes us human, what constitutes our civilization, and help you to understand where you fit in your place in time? That is a better definition of what to look for in a great book, especially as you're considering giving them to young children. While the quality list of a great book might change from person to person, I've done a bit of reading on this, and so I tried to choose, the 4 common qualities that I see pop up in articles and books about what constitutes a great book. So, for example, the first one is, it has stood the test of time and place. This is a book that is not just relevant to your demographic in your time period. This is a book that has lasted for a long time. This is a book that has really helped people to understand humanity across different cultures and across different time periods. It is not just on the New York Times bestseller list, for example. A great book is also going to touch on the themes that will resound with everyone. They're themes that really touch in on what the human condition is. They are universal, and it doesn't matter whether you are somebody who is very wealthy or very poor. It doesn't matter whether you are from a country that's very urbanized or very rural. The themes about that human condition are going to be far-reaching, and that's definitely a quality of a great book. These great books, they help us make connections between pieces of information, and they see. Charlotte Mason often called them living books. These are books that make you really think about your learning and hold on to that learning. That learning really becomes part of who you are, and you get to see the relationships between your learning. And so nothing is really, just put in its one little box and then, you finish the test and move on from it. That's the power of a great book, to make that learning so timeless. Finally, a great book will help us in the pursuit of wisdom and goodness and beauty, which is a familiar phrase for those of us who love classical education. But that pursuit of what is wise and good and beautiful is what makes education worthwhile. It's far more than just job training for the future or passing a test. But when you read these good books and you see good and beautiful topics and wise characters, and you find your soul being moved, that is a really good sign that this is a great book that you are holding in your hands. So here's some ways to choose those great books. You can look at book lists. You can get recommendations from friends. You can get curriculum choices from, lots of curriculums have a list that they give to you. None of those book lists or recommendations or curriculum choices ever really are fully complete. I feel like every time I add up my shopping list and I think, okay, I've got a good stock here, I will always be coming across a new title that I think, oh, that's so great. And so, these 3 things are a great place to get started, but remember that that your library will never really ever be finished, and it will change and grow along with you and along with your kids. So this is the area that I needed the most help with, was just making sure I knew what was coming up in the year. As a teacher, I would sit down and plot out, my whole year ahead. And that was part of my job. As a homeschooling mom, I've started doing the same thing, but it is tricky. There's a lot to wrap your head around, especially if you've got multiple kids in multiple ages. I feel like I'm very equipped to do it for my own children because I was used to doing it in a classroom, and I've taught everything from JK to grade 8 pretty much. And so that is a
task that I am familiar with, if that's something that you're struggling with, to look at your curriculum and think, okay, here's the topics, here's the resources that will best benefit my children and myself as we tackle this upcoming year, then please do reach out to me either through email or messenger. I'm available, and I would be very interested in helping you to lay down those resources, so that way as you flip over each topic and each unit this year, you've got the resources you need to bring that learning to life. So here are 4 steps that you can take today. You can start by checking out the pop-up bookshelf. I've made some links available to you that are exclusive just if you've attended this event, and you can see the resources that I've collected that I think are best suited for my children and that I hope will be useful to you as well. Also, you can browse the Usborne Library for yourself. I mean, those books that you'll see in the pop-up bookshelf, I think they're great, but there are other ones that you may personally prefer, and the Usborne Library is extensive. They've got lots of great books that are at that instructional or at that specific reading level to help your kids grasp them wherever they're at. Also, I use Goodreads. It's an app that I believe is available on both iPhone and Android, and I use it to organize books that I want to read, books that read aloud we've done as a family, children's books that I'm planning to buy when my budget allows, and so on. It's a really great tool to have on hand. And finally, my husband, who spends a lot of time reading, put me onto this strategy of categorizing my reading to make sure that I'm not just spending all my time or all my money on, just readers or just informational texts or just novels, but to really consider what categories I have already built up to, a sufficient amount, and which categories perhaps need to be added to, especially as my children grow and develop over the years. There's a lot that I have loved about teaching, but one of my favorite things is what I call the second new year. So in January, you feel all fresh, you flip over that fresh page of your journal, or you start a new calendar, and you just feel like the year holds so much promise. And for a teacher and for students, the same is also true in September. There's just something fresh about it. Newly sharpened pencils, and it's just a blank page just waiting to be written on. And so I encourage you, as you're approaching the fall and thinking about how you want to structure it and habits that you want to do, to really capitalize on that new year feeling. And I hope that by having the resources that you need to bring your learning to life, that you will feel like you're jumping into this new school year on the right foot. Make sure to click through on those links and take a look at the pop-up bookshelf. And I encourage you to search through the Usborne Library on your own. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer.